Okay, fellas, first of all, we need to end this debate about 100 v 1 gorilla. First of all, you ain't going to catch me out there with a gorilla. That's just not happening. I'm not going to be in any position to where I am in its habitat, whether natural or unnatural, because I don't even really go to the zoo. So I'm keeping it a buck with you right now, man. And I'm not going to be one of them people, if I do go tapping on the window. Have you seen what these gorillas could do when you're tapping on the window, pissing it off? You think I'm going to test my will against somebody that could do that? Come on, man. Seriously? I don't think so. Look at this photographer just worried for his life. You think that no, that ain't happening. So I don't know what everybody's talking about because I ain't going to be in that position. And even if I am, and look, you're going to need weapons because just going fist to fist, man, that ain't happening. That ain't happening. Call mystical, I guess. Somebody help the bear, but nah, homie. You ain't catching me in that situation. I'm going to tell you that right now. One, because I don't fly. I've only been on a plane one time. I was 6 years old. I remember getting on the plane. I remember getting off the plane. There's a video of me sleeping on the plane. I don't know. I don't fly. I'm too scared. The other thing is there's water. So I'm not going to be flying into a jungle because I'm never going to go anywhere over shark-infested waters, Broham, which also means I'm not taking a boat or a cruise anywhere. So I'm never going to be in a position where I'm up against a silverback. Real talk. I'm just letting you know right now, it ain't happening, man. And 100 versus 1 ain't winning either, just so everybody knows. Not with the PSI bite level, and nah, forget all that. I'm not going to get in all. I'm just telling you right now, it ain't happening. You ain't going to catch me. I would run. Call me whatever you want to. I don't care, man. I'm the other direction. If I'm face to face with a silverback gorilla, a gorilla period, man, I am escape plan. Anyway, so Doug Christie, he's the head coach now of the Kings, which, by the way, they were like, 27, 24 with him. Look, I could regale you with a bunch of stats, right? I could talk about how in clutch situations they were 13-10 with him, and before that they were 6-13. Yeah, I could talk about them being ninth while he was there in offensive production. I could discuss with you how, the Kings have Sabonis still, and them being 20-11 with him to start, but then they were 7-13 later on, and of course they lost the play-in. And I'll say this, at least he's got coaching experience, right? Because he's been an assistant there since 2021. So he's got that under his belt. The players probably like him, which I would venture to guess is another reason why they're electing to keep Doug Christie. But firing Mike Brown was still kind of weird to me, especially in the middle of the season. But, it is what it is. I think the Sacramento Kings are not necessarily in a rebuild mode, but they're nearing that mark. They need something to get them over the hump and get them to the next level. Now, whether or not it's just Doug Christie as a head coach, I don't know. But the draft is coming up, obviously, in a couple of months, and I think that's where they're going to have to make their mark. Because DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, it's a bunch of mid-level guys. Obviously, you've got Sabonis, but I think at this point, we should be allowed to question whether or not Sabonis is that guy. His contract runs through 2027, but we're going to see what happens with him and Doug Christie and what that dynamic is like. We've already seen alleged stuff happening with the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis and that whole thing. Again, it's all hearsay and rumorville. But the point is, we're going to see what happens there. We saw it again, Kevin Durant, right? There was that whole thing with Brooklyn, Steve Nash. They were so good at first. Then all of a sudden it was, that we really don't like Steve Nash. It's just, you never know how these types of things are going to pan out. I, for one, think it's a good move to hire Doug Christie. But I think if you're going to make that type of coaching decision, then I think you have to get the personnel that the coach actually wants, and you're going to have to trust him. And look, I know that as GMs, you're relying on the scouts to do their due diligence, and you've got to go out and get the best player available. But I think for me, when I think about drafts, I think not necessarily, and even free agency, it's not about getting the best player possible. It's about getting the best fit for your team. You know, I've talked about this 101 times. Odell Beckham Jr., all these guys. Look, when somebody goes to a team, and I've talked about this with Odell Beckham Jr., I've talked about this with Antonio Brown and a host of other guys. Sure, we know they're super talented, but are they going to work out in the locker room? Is the playbook going to be what's good for them? Are they going to have the respect and the admiration of the teammates around them? You know, the locker room is where everything starts. And I just think that you're going to have to get guys that work around the head coach, and that might mean getting rid of Sabonis and figuring out how to bring in new talent, not necessarily talent that has been developed by another coach or franchise. You know, people were talking about the possibility of Giannis leaving, which we're going to get into that in a little bit. But what are they saying already? Yeah, get him over to L.A. with Luka and LeBron. Well, just because you got a stacked roster does not mean that you are going to win championships. Look at Eric Spoelstra and what's going on in Miami. They just got blown out. Nobody played in that game except for Hero. He was literally the only one that gave any type of real effort. Everybody else just gave up, and people wonder why Jimmy Butler dipped. I mean, watch that series, and you're going to figure it out real quick. Got tired of being the only guy who gave a damn. People say that Jimmy Butler quit on Miami, especially in the NBA Finals. Nah, man, I think he looked around and saw a bunch of guys who just were happy to be there. Like, dude, we still have to win. You can't just be happy to be there. Being there is just not good enough. And I think that we get to question Eric Spoelstra as a head coach. He hasn't won anything outside of having that super stacked roster when he had Braun and Wade and Bosh and Allen. And even then, how much did they really win? You could say it's a players' league all you want to, but me personally, I still believe in the idea of coaching. Look at what Steve Kerr's doing with the Golden State Warriors. I just think that coaching is still a thing, and I think, and Pat Riley's, 110, so everything that he does to me right now is just so outdated. There was a time when he was great. He was great when he was the head coach of the Lakers. He was great when he was the head coach of the Miami Heat. He's been really great in the role that he's had with the Miami Heat since then. I thought he was amazing with the New York Knicks. He just ran into 23. I personally think it's just time for everybody to move on in Miami. I really do. Speaking of which, tonight also, you got the Bucks and the Pacers. I think the Pacers close out, especially without having Dame Lillard. I think their shot to win with Dame was already pretty minimal as it is. Plus, your head coach is Doc Rivers. Let's just keep it a buck. Brody's hanging on to that one championship for dear life, my man. He was put in a pretty good situation, and he did what he always does. That basketball team was 35-13 when he took them over last season. And look how it ended. Most Doc Rivers basketball teams get to the playoffs, but then everything just halts. And if people say that coaching isn't a thing, then I encourage you to go look at Doc Rivers. And especially the way that people complain about him. It's bizarre to me that people say it's a players' league and coaches don't really matter. Really? Because Doc Rivers? Are you serious? Come on, man. Look, I don't know if the Knicks, speaking of other games tonight, I don't know if the Knicks close out tonight, but I think they win the series against Detroit. But I've been saying for a while that I think they can get past the first round. But then after that, man, I think the next round they lose 4-2. I'll be honest with you. Look, I love watching the Knicks play, but I just don't think they play as a unit enough right now to win basketball games. Before the trade with Karl Anthony Towns and all that, they were a true basketball team. But now you have Karl Anthony Towns, who's so used to being an individual that he's still, to me, learning the true team game. Tibbs is another guy who's never really been able to take that next step as a coach. So I think they get past this series. I don't know if they win tonight, but I think they get past this series, and then the next series they don't do well. And then I think from there you move on from Tibbs. I really do. Even though defensively they've been so good, but even then they weren't really great this year defensively with Karl Anthony Towns. I think that was like the big thing for me. Like you lost so much defense. And I think that they decided risk reward, we gained so much offense that we're going to go ahead and take this risk. And I personally think it was a bad move. I don't think it was one that was needed. I think you go out and you draft somebody that you could develop and you could keep that defense around. But that's just me. So it is what it is. I think Boston closes out tonight. Orlando put up a pretty good fight, obviously. But I think the series, it ends. Look, Clippers and Nuggets, I'm 50-50 on that one. On who's going to take the series, I should say. Look, that's been a fun series to watch. And I think that we can all agree with that, right? That's been a really fun one to watch. But I think it kind of depends on James Harden with the Clippers, if I'm being honest with you. I think he makes or breaks this entire series. And he lets you down, as I've said before 101 times, one way or the other. Whether he gets lazy on defense, whether he gets selfish on offense, whether he starts turning the basketball over too much, whatever happens, he eventually self-destructs, and it causes everybody else to implode around him. And it's not like James Harden hasn't been without talent around him. He's had Kevin Durant, he's had Russell Westbrook, and KD on multiple occasions, by the way. He's had Kyrie Irving around him. CP3 in his prime. I guess maybe you could take that situation and look at with Doc Rivers maybe and put some blame there as well. But I just, in terms of, the development of CP3, I should say. But, when he was in Houston, I just felt like that was his best time. And I don't think he's ever going to get that back again. We see what he's capable of. He puts up a lot of flashy highlights, but he just can't get to the next level. I don't know if the Clippers are better off without him, but I don't know if they're really that much better with him. So we'll see. Games from last night real quick here. Look, first of all, I love watching Dillon Brooks. I don't give a damn what anybody says. I love watching him. And if you saw the interview, I'm sure you saw Jimmy Butler go, man, we are not having fun, bro. It's the playoffs. I don't like him. He don't like me. We're not having fun. Dillon Brooks is always laughing and having a good time because that's what Dillon Brooks does. He thrives in that situation, man. He loves being that way. He loves playing the game that way. And I'll keep it a buck. I love watching Dillon Brooks play because it reminds me of almost a forgotten time in the NBA. It seems like it wasn't that long ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. And so what we're seeing with the Warriors and Rockets is kind of that remnant, right? Old head, that's fine. I'll be an old head. I don't give a damn. I got people already calling me Unc on the internet. I'm cool with it, to be honest with you. Like, I'm good. I just think that Houston was trying to play bully ball, and Draymond and Steph have not forgot who they are. And even though Jimmy didn't really show up until the fourth quarter, it was really when Golden State needed him the most. And I think for me, that was the big difference, was Jimmy Butler. Him in the fourth quarter. Other than that, Houston dominated a good majority of that basketball game. But the Warriors are never out of it. And they didn't lay down and die like what we saw with Miami. Of course, neither did Houston because they got down big in that game at the beginning, if anybody remembers that. Initially, it was all Golden State. And as far as the way Draymond played goes, look, he could say all he wants to. It was an accident, and him, man, I'm rolling over, and Reggie, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. It's shoot to the head by accident, man. That wasn't no accident, Brody. That wasn't an accident at all, man, and we all know that. And then Draymond, the little screen, and then, come on, Brody. Cat Williams, do you know that I can see you? Like, come on, man. let's stop the cab, Brody, all right? I love watching it, but come on, let's keep it a buck. You know what I mean? So Golden State, I think they're going to close that series out next game probably. And really quick here, I do want to say this. I think it's about time we put some respect on Van Fleet's name. You really need to go back and rewatch the NBA Finals when the Raptors won. Kawhi was not at his best. And Van Fleet and Pascal Siakam, those guys really stepped up. And we're seeing what Pascal's got going on in Indiana right now. I think it was best for him and Van Fleet to go their different ways. I really do. Especially after you got rid of a coach that got you to where you want to go. I mean, again, this is a reoccurring theme in the NBA, right? You got a decent coach, you let him go, and then the team falls apart. It is what it is. Final thing here real quick, Nick Chubb. You know that he is a free agent right now, which blows my mind. Since 2018, when he was drafted, he's got the 4th most rushing yards in all the NFL. And by the way, that's with only having played 10 games in the last 2 seasons. Now, somebody's going to go, well, yeah, bro, that's why he's still a free agent. He's only played 10 games in the last 2 seasons. Okay, but up until that point, though, very reliable. First 2 years, didn't miss a game. Second year, played 12. Third year, played 12. Next year, he played 17. So I think Nick Chubb is pretty reliable. Okay, he had the surgeries from the 2023 injury when he busted his knee. I get it. Okay, and I don't know how many people expected him to recover. Having a pretty good year up until he broke his foot. But I'll tell you this right now. Lifetime average of 5.1 a carry. I'll take that on a first down tote any day of the week. And there should be any coach out there that would love to see it. Now, here's the thing. Everybody wants to talk about examples in the NFL with the running back position re-exploding the way that it did with Derrick Henry and the market increasing again the way that it did with Saquon Barkley. It could be that Nick Chubb is being made an example out of. We don't want to pay this guy too much because we got to leave room for our quarterback and our linemen and all that stuff. That could be the message from the NFL. I'm not saying that it is, but I'm not saying that it isn't either. It should blow anybody's mind, though, that Nick Chubb doesn't belong to a football team. He has been carrying that Browns franchise on his back offensively since he's been there. And that includes the Baker Mayfield years. I'm telling you right now, one of the most underappreciated running backs in the league. And he's literally one of the best running backs in the league. That's just crazy to me. People out here talking about crazy work, son. That's crazy work. That's bananas that Nick Chubb doesn't know somewhere to be. If I was a GM of a football team, I'd have him right now. And honestly, Denver, they could really use somebody out there that can be utilized. Nick Chubb is that guy. And if I'm Denver, I'm getting Bo Nix all the help that I can get. That's all I'm saying. NFC East, Dallas Cowboys, they could use some running back room. But, you paid Dak Prescott a lot of money, so how much cap space are you really going to have for Nick Chubb? Washington, maybe. It really blows me away. And honestly, I love what Jane Daniels is doing out there. But to me, you take some pressure off of him by getting him a super running back. And same thing with Bo Nix. But that's just me, though. All right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio, and wherever you listen to the podcast. Simply tell your device to play the Drew Duncan Sports Show. Everybody stay safe and have a wonderful rest of your night and or day.